Hello, I'm Renee from the Bee and Bear Homestead, and today I'm going to be making some peach honey butter with peaches that ripened from our tree. And I will be using a recipe from the Better Homes and Gardens books, Can It, which I have made a tutorial with before for the garlic marinara sauce. So I'll be using the peach honey butter recipe in this book, but I've modified it just slightly. Again, to save a little bit of time. The main thing is that this recipe tells you to skin your peaches, but because I'm going to wear it up using an immersion blender, I have made it before without skinning the peaches and then just whirred up the skins and all with my blender, and it tastes just fine to me. So I leave the skins on for this recipe. So I will show you all the steps for making some peach honey butter, whether you get your peaches from a tree growing in your yard or from a farmer's market. This is delicious and is delightful to pull out of your pantry in the winter when you want a little taste of summer sunshine. Here is everything I need to make this peach honey butter recipe. There's the recipe. I'll put the name of the book in the comments of the video. It says to use 18 peaches, and I have a note in my recipe, use less. I'm going to try 15 peaches, and of course peaches are all different sizes, and so that's a pretty variable amount. So I'm going to use 15 peaches and see how that looks in my pot. You also need 1/4 cup of water just to make sure they don't stick. You're going to add 2 1/4 cups of sugar and 3/4 cup of honey. That's all there is to it. So the nice thing about an apple butter or peach butter or pumpkin butter, it's not a jelly, so you don't have to make a gel. You don't have to add pectin, but you can it to preserve it. So I've also got my canning tools and 5 pints and sharp knife cutting board, immersion blender, pot that I'm going to be using for actually making the butter, and my nice big stock pot for canning. So let's go ahead and get started. The first part of the recipe says to combine your pitted, skinned, and chopped up peaches into a large stock pot with a little bit of water and cover it up and let it simmer. So as I said in my intro, I'm not going to actually skin my peaches. I'm just going to cut them and make sure that, I've already washed my hands. I've already washed the peaches, and my countertop is clean. My tools are all clean. That's important when canning, of course. I say it in every video, but I'll repeat it. Make sure you keep your hands clean and your surfaces and tools clean. So since my peaches are clean and I'm going to blend it up, I'm not going to skin them, but I'm going to chop up my peaches, put them in my stock pot, and then simmer them to let them get soft. So that's the first step. Those 15 peaches filled up my pot, and I remember before that the 18 peaches was too much, so I just used 15. I'm adding 1/4 cup of water, and the recipe says to bring to boiling, then reduce heat and simmer covered for 10 to 15 minutes while the peaches soften. Then you're going to blend them up with an immersion blender. So this is a really nice and simple recipe. The peaches simmered covered for about 15 minutes, and they're nice and soft and juicy. So now it's time to blend them up in my immersion blender. And that's real loud, so I'll do that and be back. After you have blended up your peaches, then you turn back on the heat. Not too high, because you don't want to burn them. And add 2 1/4 cups of sugar. and 3/4 cup of honey. Then you simmer it until it's the thickness that you want. The recipe says another 10 minutes, but I know from doing this before, I usually simmer it for longer than that because I like it to be just a little thicker to spread nicer on toast. So it's pretty simple. I got my sugar, honey, and peaches in my pot. I'll simmer it until it's thick, and then we'll be ready to can. Peach honey butter has been simmering about 40 minutes on the stove, and it's a consistency that I like now. It's not as thick as jelly, but I think it'll be nice to spread on toast and sandwiches. So I'm gonna can it. I've got my stock pot next to me I've estimated 5 pints for the amount that I have in my pot, and the jars are already in there. They've been washed and are in the hot water to keep them sterilized. I've got my canning tools right here and a clean washcloth that I will use for wiping the rims. I've made this recipe for several years in a row, and I know that even though it calls for using a 1/2 pint jar, I always made more than what the quantity of the recipe said it would make. So I've estimated that I'm going to fill 5 actual pint jars, not 1/2 pint jars. So you want to fill your jar. Make sure you know the headspace. Every canning recipe tells you how much headspace you need. In general, jellies need less headspace than vegetables, and this recipe calls for 1/4 inch headspace, which is not very much, so you can fill your jar pretty high. Use a clean washcloth to wipe your rim to make sure you don't have anything that'll get in the way for the sealing. Jar grippers are really helpful to get the ring on tight without hurting yourself on the hot jar, and put it back in your simmering water. I've got all my honey butter in jars. I've got 4 pints in the boiling water bath getting ready to return to boiling. When it returns to boil, it only needs to process for 5 minutes because jellies, the sugar in them helps keep them safer. They usually need a very little processing time, but we're boiling them in the bath to seal the rings and to make sure they're safe. And I got about 1/2 jar that I put in a non-canning jar, and I'll just put it in the fridge to enjoy right away. So my recipe with 15 peaches ended up making 4 and about 1/2 pints, if you're following along. Right, my peach honey butter has been processing at a full rolling boil for 5 minutes. So I'll turn off the heat and get my jars out. I'm going to let them sit and cool. Ideally not touch them for about 24 hours, and then you can test their seals to make sure that they have fully sealed. I just heard one of my jars seal, the one in the back, popped down with a very distinctive ping. So let's see if another one goes. And that's the sound you want to hear. It tells you that your whatever you've canned has been sealed. And you can see the depression on the top of the jar now. These 2 haven't sealed yet, and the 2 in the back have. I hope you've enjoyed making some peach honey butter with me, and you won't regret making this because you can pull it out in the wintertime and get a little taste of summer. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to see more videos on how to preserve your garden and orchard produce, subscribe to our channel. We'll be posting more videos all the time.